Welcome to the Orca Shop. My name's Rod, working on Elfyn and working on the floorboards. So as you can see, we've kind of got them in. I'm going to go through the process of how I made them and some of the particulars. Now I did again lose some video, so I'll briefly explain that all of the floorboards are made of cedar. The thickness of each one of the planks is 1/2 inch, and I think they're 2.5 inches wide. We sort of figured that out from dimensions and what would work and what was on stock. I just had enough nice dark red cedar to complete the floorboards rather than having to switch to a different sort of color, different board. So that worked out quite well. I made this into 3 sections, and I started out by making the floor timbers, which are the supports underneath here. And the simplest way to do that was to use the frames or the molds themselves to sort of get an idea. So we've got a support pretty much at every location that a frame was, or sorry, a mold was, which is exactly where these 2 frames are, 3 and 5. So it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are where the floor timbers are. And once I had all of the floor timbers ready and all at the same level, same height and horizontal across, I just started to lay out the floorboards themselves, starting from the center out. And of course, the first place I started was, first place I started here was the slot to fit around the centerboard box, which took a little bit of trial and error, but managed to get that slot in there. And I just worked my way out. I had a little spacer, and away we went. Alright, the final touches on the floorboards here, or basically the last piece to go in, is this small piece, shapely piece, 4 of the in the forward section. So I've made it a bit wider. I'm going to try and do a bit of a curve through here. It'll go straight through the section and curve towards the back again. So this section here is going to have 2 screws in it. Next, it's going to be sort of trying to figure out the general shape through this section here. Not so easy to do. So we're just going to trim that off as a unit so that it appears this curve. And I will be putting another support underneath here to make sure that this is, and I'm also going to need to undercut, underbevel this piece here so it's not touching the actual floor. Nevertheless, I think it's time to remove at least this 4 section here, clean up this curve through the, trim off the floor timbers here. They don't need to stick out. And then we can move on to the next section. So if we lift this out, need, and I will be putting another piece of mahogany across here to support these small pieces. So if we go across there, I need 12 inches. I'll go up 12 by 1/2 by 1. Something like that across there. Now the question is, if I drill from the back side, I'm going to have to countersink somewhat. So this screw has got some threads into the planking, but I think, I don't know which to do first. I think I'll put this in first. I think we can just counterbore a little bit deeper. Okay, I've just put one in, and now I'm just going to make sure this is going square across. Which one can I use here? That one's a bit high, so right there. I'm just going to put 1 per. was just worried that might be hitting the keelson in the center there, but it's thin enough. It's weird. Pivoting on something. Go. So for the curve through the center section, I'm going to down the batten here. Maybe a clamp back here, because I want to bend this through to a mark I've made. That'll get us the curve carrying through the fore section into here. It'll go straight through the back, and then we'll create the curve in the aft section. I cut that carefully on the bandsaw. I can just use it as a template for the other side. At first I can cut off some of these. Clean this up with my block plane. For the aft floorboard section, I have trimmed. What I'm happy with is the sort of profile at the side. I've trimmed the floor timbers themselves. So now I'd like to add the support for this little piece here, which is not going to be a problem to put the 1/2 inch through there, but I need to taper this off to accommodate for the curvature of the floor, or the planking on the floor. So if I go in here with this, I may very well go through. I may need to go to a number 6 and a little bit shorter. See what we have in the box. 1/2 inch versus these, which are 3/4. Not even sure. Yeah, 3/4. I'm really just looking to hold it in place so that this doesn't bounce much. I mean, it'll be supported as people walk on it. Okay, so with that all trimmed up, let's hope that little cross member support section does not interfere with this laying down flat at the bottom of the boat. Does not appear to. Perfect. Just got to route off these edges. I've been sanding and all, and they are ready for oil. I'm pretty happy with the way the floorboards have turned out. We've got a nice taper through the aft section here, meeting up with the center section, which has a start of a slight taper towards the end, and then it all fits together and comes together. Now we have a bit of a gap in the fore section here, and that is because we have to get the hatch cover in there. But all in all, I think it's going to look pretty sweet with some oil on there. In this center section of floorboards, till we're getting a little bit of rubbing in installation because there's red paint. Now I have just going to take a chisel and a small plane, clean that out. It doesn't have to be tight in there, so a little bit of room for it to slide in easier now. It's going to be a little better. And then I guess we need to determine hole for mast to go through. hole at the base, 1 3/4. What if we go 2 inches above here? We're going to go right up to 2.5. Got lots of room then for mast, with the rake of the mast going in to not be hitting the sides of the hole. Alright, I don't have enough room on the drill press to make this happen, but I think I might be able to just work this work because it's going right through the center. Go. And lastly, customer would like, and I think it's sort of a good idea, is we're going to drill a hole in here so that a bilge pump, just a hand one, can go into there, so you don't have to take the floorboards out just to do a little pumping. So I think somewhere in that area there would probably just drill it the same size, big enough for any pump to fit through. Now that the floorboards are made, sanded, oiled, and installed, just need to fashion up some method of holding them down. So I'm looking at using some brass, which will just be maybe on a pivot in this area here. The only issue being is that when this pivots, it's going to want to ride up and scratch there. So I think in this section here, I really only can put one in. And I don't know whether I'm going to have to go right across the center. I mean, it's going to look odd if it's a little off center. I know there's a screw still in there. Not that I can't take the screw out, I'm sure. Maybe we can use that screw. But then the 1/2 inch brass here is not really wide enough to span to, when it does span it, but I don't think it's going to hold it in there. I would like to see something a little wider in here. So maybe a brass piece with a piece of wood underneath it so it can spin a little bit easier and hold that down. In the aft section, the floorboards are actually a little higher. So that lends itself a lot better to having a piece of brass across here, maybe using a copper tubing to keep the screw in check, and we can just pivot that and then the floorboards are able to lift out. On the very forward section and the very aft section here, do I need to put some sort of cleat across here to hold this down? I mean, they don't really move that much. I mean, they're not really going to move side to side because they fit over the keelson. If I'm going to do that, maybe just a small cleat in here, screwed in from the back, and I'll paint that. So that's how I'll probably handle holding it down on the aft bulkhead and the forward bulkhead. The forward section's a little trickier because I've got a hatch that's going to go into there, so I don't even know whether I need something up there anyway. So to hold the floorboards down, I remembered I had some bronze bushings, so they are literally a small piece of tubing. I then took one of them and cut them in half, and cutting that in half and cleaning it up turns out to be the perfect height that if I was to put a screw in there, lay the piece of brass across the top, this might be a little longer than that I suppose, and put the screw right through so that this can still turn, as can the piece of brass. That's going to work for this section. I'll put one on this side and one on the other side, and then we'll figure out the forward section. I need to drill a hole through the brass big enough for silicone bronze screw to go through. So we'll try this size here. I always like to start with a center punch and then a small hole, and then work my way up to the bigger drill bit so that it doesn't wander all over the place. I was afraid of. You know, I've been meaning to get myself a drill press vise. So, is that big enough? screw. Suppose with a countersink it will. This is a bit of a experiment right now. Suppose I could go actually with a number 6 in that length. That should have enough threads to hold in. I mean, it's not under any pressure. I've added the little cleat to the aft bulkhead, and that should be able to hold it all down. I think it's going to work just fine. It's under there. These drop down. Then with the floorboards under the cleat on the bulkhead, we can just press down and turn our little brass fittings here, and that's certainly not going to fall out of there. On the most forward floorboard section here to hold it down, I've just made this little bracket, and because the frame is actually a little lower than the seats, I wanted to raise it up so that I can turn this to the center, and then just by pushing down, this will lock them into place. Now, of course, these things are going to get rubbed, they're going to get worn, but that's not a problem. You know, they're simple enough to replace or re-oil the floorboards. So I think that is going to take care of holding that down. I mean, that, you know, it can come out of there, I suppose, under great force, but I'm not going to worry about the forward edge up there. So, just need to take that off and add a little bit of oil to it. Do here, and I did manage to actually put a screw right through the plug, because the screw that's right through the frame into the keel is much deeper, so there's still enough purchase area there for the screw to hold on. With the floorboards in, oiled, and held down by the cleats and the brass fittings, that's going to conclude this episode. I want to send out a welcome to a couple of new subscribers, and a thank you to all of the subscribers that have followed me over the years. I do appreciate all the support you've given me, and maybe give this one a thumbs up as well, and we'll see you next time. Take care.